Welcome to Lady Family Live, everybody. I'm Jason Lady, and excited to be your host this evening for another installment of our Wine Club new release tasting and webinar. We always love when these webinars are interactive, so please use the chat function, use that Q&A to ask questions or share your thoughts, share what you're tasting, anything you want to talk to us about. I'm sure there will be members of our team in that chat as well to answer questions or to interact with you guys throughout the course of the night. Great time of year to visit us here in Napa. I did mention it's cool, but it's the perfect season to sip on some Cabernet and enjoy the fire, the wood burning fireplace that we have here in the tasting room. So if you're thinking about coming out to Napa anytime soon, it's definitely a good time. We'd love to see you. Your club newsletter, check that out online. You'll be able to find recipes, tech notes, all kinds of fun stuff in there, more information on the wines, and definitely encourage you to check that out if you haven't yet. Great recipe from Chef Lynn at the Poetry Inn there coming this month. Little caviar and chip dip sort of deal. It's a little bit more elaborate than that, but trust me, it looks delicious. I think I'm going to try to whip it up for New Year's myself with some of that Brut sparkling from Fell Wines. Last thing, it's possibly a little late to try to get an order to you guys for Christmas, but certainly if you're looking to order any wines for New Year's, let us know. Give us a call. We'd love to put something together for you, so reach out to us, please. And lastly, we just announced that our Valentine's dinner is going to be returning in February. So if you haven't seen that email yet, you will soon. And it'd be a great night. Always have an amazing lineup of food and wine. So definitely something to consider. So the program for tonight, we're going to have Sarah Green, our winemaker for Fell Wines, join us to talk about the two new releases from Fell. And then Chris Tynan, our director of winemaking for Cliff Lady Vineyards, is going to join me right here in the Cliff Lady Winery, which is just in behind me here. And we'll look forward to tasting some of the new releases from Cliff Lady from him. So with that, let's get the party started. I'm ready to start tasting some Pinot Noir. We want to hear again from you guys in the chat. What are you tasting tonight? What are you enjoying? If you had anything great lately, let us know. We would love to hear about it. I'm going to bring Sarah in now. And if you have any questions, again, of course, like throw those in there. We'll try to answer them as we go through the night here. So we're going to be tasting two wines from Fell tonight, two wines from the 2020 vintage. And let's see if I can get Sarah to get video and mic. Here she comes. Awesome. Hello, Sarah. Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yes, excellent. Welcome. It's great to see you. How are things going?
Good. Yeah, we're getting ready to wrap up another great year here, and the winery is in amazing shape. The team's been working hard, and they're all ready for the holidays.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure we all are at this point. It's been a kind of a crazy year. Have you guys been able to taste any of the 2022 lots yet? Have you?
Kidding? That's all we do.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, well, I know they just did it here with the Cliff Lady team, so I'm curious.
Yeah, we're thrilled with the vintage, and actually just this afternoon we were poking around in the barrel room, and especially the Chardonnays are in incredible shape, and the Pinots. I mean, really, we have no complaints. The wines are really. It's been a strong vintage. Oh,
great. That's excellent news. Well, we've got two excellent wines as well from a couple years back, from 2020, the Farrington and the Wendling. Where would you like to start tonight? Would you start down the south end with Farrington? Is that?
Let's start with the Farrington, yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's do it. So actually, that's what I've got in my glass. I figured that's where we would go. So 2020 Farrington Vineyard. I mean, this vineyard is a little bit further inland, right? So it's a little bit warmer section of the valley. But what did that mean for this wine in 2020?
Yeah, so just some framing. Part of why it's so great to start with Farrington is that's also always where our harvest starts. That's the beginning of our vintage. So as you're saying, Jason, the vineyard is kind of in the warmest spot in the valley. So quick refresher, Anderson Valley, the home of Fell Wines, is situated 100 miles north of where we are now. And it's kind of what we consider it to be California's northernmost fine wine growing region. And the valley is sort of on a diagonal angle that goes from southeast to northwest towards the ocean. So the heart of Anderson Valley is really Savoy, our estate, which is right in the middle. And then Farrington is right in the town of Boonville, which is where the valley starts. And if you ever go to Anderson Valley, which you should, it's a fun place to visit. Boonville is where you would stay. That's the town. And Farrington Vineyard is right there in the town of Boonville. You barely left the town and Farrington is right there. So being in that kind of southeast spot in the valley, it's the furthest from the ocean, and that's why it gets to be the warmest. And that's also why it's the first thing that we pick every year. So actually, the Pinot ripens even faster than the Chardonnay that we have there. We also harvest Chardonnay for our Anderson Valley Chardonnay blend. And the Pinot at Farrington is really all about freshness and brightness. And being in that warm spot means that it ripens the fastest, and it's the first thing that we pick. And it's the first wine in the lineup whenever we're pouring our wines, because it has that character that we love. So 2020 vintage was kind of a perfect growing season. We had a little bit of a late start, but then just a beautiful, warm, even summer. It was kind of the dream scenario in terms of just really even ripening. And so the fruit just had beautiful development. Of course, we all remember the sort of extreme heat that came right at the sort of end of summer, right as harvest was beginning. And a heat wave can do a lot of things. It can wreak a lot of havoc. But one thing that it can do that's positive on the winemaking side is it can kind of push us to pick, because we see the heat coming and we're like, let's go. And especially with a site like Farrington, where we really want to grab all that bright, fresh fruit. When we see heat coming, we know that's our time, that's our cue to go in there and get it. So what we find often is the vintages marked like 2020 by heat waves are also often vintages where we can get optimum freshness and a lot of the bright acid that we love in a Farrington Pinot. And I think this is a really good example of that. So Farrington, that, if you think of it as the kind of the summer of the Pinots, it's the bright, fresh red fruit. That's where we get the strawberry and the cherry that are often kind of the fruit characters that we see in Anderson Valley. And it's definitely always going to be the most red fruit driven of our Pinot lineup.
Yes, it's kind of fun to be able to taste the north and the south kind of.
I was thinking that there's a fun contrast, these two together.
Would you say that, because it's further inland that, things get riper? Is it a more of an early drinking wine? I mean, I have my thoughts about this. It seems to have a lot of structure and freshness, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, is this something that compared to the others is more of a, let's start here and then let the others sit in the cellar for a couple of years, or what would you think?
I like to think it can do both. I mean, partly because it has that, it's marked by that primary character, that primary fruit character. It tastes great, like right off the bottling line. That is a delicious, delicious wine. But there's a lot of things that contribute to how a wine ages, how well it ages. And sometimes we think of the biggest, richest, most tannic wines as being the ones that need to be laid down or that benefit from years and years of aging. But the other thing that really contributes to a wine preserving its freshness over a long period of time is acid. And, that's kind of the other thing you can use to really prop up the structure and the longevity of a wine. And so Farrington is definitely a place we see that. So we often find in older vintages of this wine that acid kind of has helped hold it together and let that, as the primary fruit character might start to fall a little bit of years of aging, the brightness from the acid and the concentration of the fruit really make it kind of an interesting wine to age. And I personally love aged Pinot. I mean, I often find that a 20-year-old Pinot, which is nothing like a brand new Pinot, has just such lovely character. It develops those tertiary bottle aging characters. And I think that even if the fruit is what we associate with Farrington, I love to see where it goes when it develops that kind of more sort of earthy, sort of almost mushroomy quality, which to me, that's a beautiful thing in a Pinot.
Absolutely. Well, totally the perspective that I have on this wine as well. I love drinking it now. It's very hard to resist all that beautiful strawberry and bright red fruit. But there's certainly some tension there that I think will reward those who maybe want to stick a couple bottles away and see what happens. Why don't we shift gears then and make our way up north and see how things kind of change from one end to the other. Now, I know the Wendling Vineyard is a vineyard we haven't worked with as much as Farrington, right? Like we don't have as far back history. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so the first vintage that we released a Vineyard Designate of Wendling was 2017. So it is newer. It's, kind of our most recent additional Vineyard Designate wine. And it is, as I was saying before, a really cool contrast with Farrington. So it's in the polar opposite end of the valley. So if Farrington is right in Boonville, in the warmest spot, Wendling is actually the last vineyard in Anderson Valley before the ocean. There's no other vineyards past that point. It's just a few more minutes kind of driving through redwoods and you get out to the ocean. And so it's in the coolest part of the valley, but the vineyard itself kind of doesn't act like a cool spot at all. It's positioned on this really steep hillside. I mean, other than Savoy, which, we love to talk about our state vineyard, Wendling is a really cool site to talk about. It's certainly a very dramatic site, really steep hillsides, which on a clear day you can see across redwood ridges to the ocean. And it's really obvious in the glass that it's a wine that's all about power and structure. And we sort of view our job with Wendling is to kind of just hang on for dear life and kind of not let it just take off like a stallion out of the stable. So they're basically like the two most contrasted wines, I think, in our lineup. And our winemaking doesn't change so much between the two. We still try to have a light touch, but very much so with Wendling, we're trying to kind of keep our hands off and just really let the fruit show. Because, if you work it too much, it can really become a monster, we've found. So we fermented at a cooler temperature and we try to really capture it. We don't leave it on the skin any additional time. We're really trying to just capture the prettiness that's there, and know that it's still going to always be a bolder, darker wine. That's just who it is. And we don't want to crush its soul, its terroir. We want to embrace that, but also try to show it off to the best of our abilities. Both of these wines, I want to note, have no new oak on them. That's sort of something that we started to experiment with, and then in 2020. This vintage in bottle was the first vintage where we really felt like we understood that new oak was kind of, in our Vineyard Designate wines, a little bit of a distraction because these sites are really special. Wendling, Farrington, Savoy, they have a lot of personality, they have a lot of spice and character and polish all on their own. And we started to notice that the oak was actually not at all necessary. So what you're tasting in the glass is truly site expression, and we're just kind of trying to be the vessels for that.
Is there any other technique changes that you've kind of brought in the last few years when it comes to the Pinot Noirs, like anything with whole cluster, or anything that I'm not commenting on? Or
I think the main thing for us has been kind of understanding how to use temperature as a factor for control. We're not doing a lot to the wines. We're really trying to not overwork them. So using temperature to be a controlling factor. The hotter your ferments are, the more extractive they're going to be. You're going to get more tannin. You're going to get more sort of that kind of just those rougher edges. And there's a place for those, certainly, in lots of winemaking. But for the Pinot that we're making from Anderson Valley, it's a really spice-driven place. It doesn't need, it naturally has plenty of tannin, and we don't need to push them that hard. So I think over the last couple of years, we've really moved towards cooler fermentations and shorter fermentations. So, we have a few days of cold soak at the beginning, which is pretty standard for most folks. And then once fermentation starts, which we're really just doing with temperature control, we're not using any added yeast because we have a strong native yeast population in the winery. They just sort of take off as soon as they warm up. And Pinot Noir is kind of famous for fermenting really fast. It's got thin skins, and as soon as they start to break down, it takes off like a rocket. All the sugar sort of just jumps out of the berries. and the fermentation goes really quickly. So we often see that after maybe 3-4 days in tank at a cold temperature, things start to warm up and they're dry. All the sugar is gone within another couple of days. And then we really try to press off the skins really early so that we're not getting the extended maceration, which is super useful tool for a lot of other kinds of winemaking. But I would say that in addition to changing the oak profile, in the last couple of years, we've moved away from the hot ferments and the really extractive ferments. And I think the results really show in the glass that we're getting a lot of sort of purity of site expression. So we're really happy with that.
Awesome. Well, the wines, they taste delicious. You know, one of the things that always strikes me with this particular wine, and we also got a question from Fred that ties into this. The Wendling Vineyard tends to have a more muscular and a bit more structured profile. And, you know, I think thinking closer to the ocean, you know, cooler, you would think that it's a lighter, maybe more like acid driven, but it kind of has a little bit more oomph in that regard. Certainly compared to Farrington, which thinking warmer, you think would be the more, you know, broad-shouldered wine. But why is it that Wendling has that kind of power and concentration to it, even though it is closer to the ocean?
Yeah, so I think there's a few different things going on, and I think it's really all just sort of driven by the site. We often talk about the relationship between the kind of the crop, how heavy the crop is, and the resulting fruit on the vine. And Wendling is definitely a lower vigor site. So like I was saying, it's up on a hillside and quite a steep hillside actually, and you know, that's a more sort of free draining environment for the vines. And that's going to result in often lower yield. So it's sort of there's less water just sort of sitting in the soil. And so there's going to be less vigor. The canopy is a little lighter and the clusters are just fewer clusters, you know, on each vine. And so you get
smaller berries and
smaller clusters, smaller berries, and fewer clusters per vine. So they're all really packing a big punch. And I think that that's really a big piece of it. It's also kind of, the way it's positioned is kind of interesting. So even though it's closest to the ocean, the Navarro River runs through Anderson Valley, kind of the mouth of the Navarro River at Navarro State Beach, which is a beautiful beach, you should all visit. And then that kind of runs all the way down through the valley. And that's the funnel of cool air that kind of brings the fog and the moisture into the valley and really is the defining, you know, all the vineyards in the valley are kind of, their microclimate is in context to their proximity to the Navarro River. So for example, Savoy is at the most narrow point in the valley, and it's basically right there next to the river. So it's really getting almost the most impact from the river just because of proximity, even though it's farther from the ocean. Meanwhile, Wendling, being way up on this hillside, it's also a part of the valley where the river deviates from the vineyards. There's a little ridge there. So it's closest to the ocean, but weirdly, it's kind of counterintuitive. It's furthest from the river. So it's actually not getting that cold air impact that vineyards further south that are closer in proximity to the cold air from the river. So it actually acts like a much warmer site than it is. So I think that complexity creates a really dynamic wine. I think that's what comes through.
Well, excellent. It's a delicious wine, and I learned something. Yeah, I'm always curious why that wine kind of had that power to it. But both of these wines, I think, great now, great with some time in the cellar, and tasting the Savoy the last session, and over the last couple of weeks here, we've gotten the tasting room. It's great to see what you guys were able to do in a really challenging year for a lot of reasons, as we all remember.
Yeah.
So with that, Sarah, I just want to say thanks again for joining us on the program tonight. I hope you have a great holiday. Hopefully you've got some plans to spend with family and hopefully get away for a little bit. I don't know, but hope you have a great, happy holiday, and I look forward to seeing you in the new year.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason, and thanks to all of you for joining this evening.
Great. Cheers, Sarah.
Bye.
All right, guys. Well, that was great. I mean, definitely fun learning more in depth about a really cool vineyard. But I've got a wonderful gentleman here live in I can't say the studio, I guess, but the Cliff Lady Winery. We've got Chris Tynan here, who's been patiently waiting to join the program so that we can talk about the Cliff Lady wine. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here.
Feels like a talk show.
I know. I was going to say we need like one of those boxes that says like applause, and we need like a studio audience and all that. Like that would be that. There's my dream right there, right? That'd be dream come true. But hey, we've got some great wines to taste from Cliff Lady tonight. We did comment a little bit on the 22 vintage, and you guys just tasted them. What did you guys think coming out of that tasting this week?
It was definitely a vintage that tested us because we picked so quickly in 2022. It was a warm year and we got everything before the heat really zapped everything. So with the wines we tasted this week, we're just really happy and pleasantly surprised with how the vintage is tasting already. A lot of fresh acidity, really balanced acid and flavors, and we think it's going to be a really, really excellent vintage. It's already tasting great, and it's got another almost 2 years to go in the barrel. So
nice.
We're excited to taste it this early. Normally we taste them in January or February. So we got a little bit earlier this year, and yeah, we're excited.
A little holiday treat before everything kind of really quiets down. Well, let's talk about another, really exceptional year. We've got the 2019, it's not really shown up, but that's okay. 2019 Claret from Cliff Lady. So we'll taste a little bit of the Claret before we get into our Howell Mountains. I think we've covered 2019 numerous times on these webinars, but I mean, what more can you say, right? It was pretty much the most perfect vintage that you could ask for from a winemaking perspective. Just constant cool nights, warm days, nothing really extreme. Am I missing anything?
No, just even Steven, Goldilocks, just everything in its right place, and very easy for winemakers to make great wine in a year like that. And this wine's no exception. The 2019 Claret is just a great, we call it our everyday kind of pizza wine, but it can stand up to formal cuisine as well.
Yeah.
Just, I think it's really pretty aromatically, just lots of like Indian spices and just fabulous kind of texture and just early drinking pleasure. I think that's what the Claret's made for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, great years come through in the wines, and certainly wines like this certainly get elevated when they have all this wonderful different lots to work with. I mean, we have the pleasure of working with some great growers, and obviously our estate vineyard here in Stag's Leap, our estate in Calistoga. And so, I mean, to have a bottle that kind of brings them all together is kind of neat, especially in an approachable sense. So we know this is a crowd favorite, and we hope everybody's enjoying this wine either tonight or over the holidays, because it certainly is very versatile.
Yeah, I think there's a little extra Merlot in this vintage to the 2019. It really gives it this expansive mid palate and real silkiness that's really lovely and really great.
It's delicious stuff, man. But this is what I'm really excited about tonight. I'm going to take a trip back in time and go to, again, not really showing up, but 2014 Cliff Lady Howell Mountain Cabernet. So I always remember the 2014s as being like fairly approachable, and out of the gate they were just really fun to drink and enjoy. And I remember selling them, on wholesale. The Stag's Leap Cab was always just like, as soon as you pull that cork, it was thoroughly enjoyable. Not necessarily something that needed a lot of time, with air or time in the cellar. So it's fun to kind of go back now and see. I mean, it's hard to believe this is a 8-year-old wine. 2014 was 8 years ago. And come back to this and see that it still kind of has that sense of like, it's just kind of there. It's ready to go. It's delicious. It's not certainly folding in on itself as far as I'm picking up. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think overall, generally our 2014s were really approachable early on. It's kind of a vintage that is sandwiched between two great vintages, the 13 and the 15, and it kind of got overlooked. And I thought was one of our best vintages of the decade. And I think of the lineup, I think Howell Mountain might have been the one exception where it would benefit a little bit more from some time in the cellar.
Oh, gotcha.
And just because it was a little bit impenetrable early on, but the stuffing was there, like all the ingredients were there to make an amazing wine. And really, I haven't tasted this in quite a while, probably a few years, and I'm really happy to see where this wine is. It's really beautiful. I mean, Howell Mountain as an appellation is kind of has a really opposite kind of a terroir and a climate that we do here in Stag's Leap, because it's high up on the mountain. So during the day, as the heat's kind of warming up the valley below, it's breezy and cool up on the mountain, just at that higher elevation. And then the opposite happens at night, where the heat's rising up from the valley and kind of keeping those vineyards a little warm. And it is kind of a rainy appellation as well. They get a lot more rain than we do here on the valley, but because it's in the mountain, it's a hillside, it's just super really well drained. Really two types of soil up there too, the tufa, volcanic soil, and then there's some iron rich clay, and our vineyards both utilize both those soil types up in Howell Mountain. So we kind of get the beautiful expression of Howell Mountain in this wine. And gosh, just so much pine forest aromas in this. It's like,
is that kind of the trademark Howell quality? Is it that kind of pine forest note that you typically, at least with our wines, is that what you?
For sure, yeah, you get that Sous-Bois kind of forest floor note. And then because the Howell Mountain the soils are so well drained, you get these small little clusters with small berries. So there's an added concentration up there. And so they do, these wines tend to benefit from a couple of years in bottle just to round out those tannins and let them integrate. And I think this wine is showing really beautifully. I'm really happy with this wine.
Would that be what people, when they say like the mountain tannins, is that what they're referring to? Like they're just typically a little bit, more aggressive than say something from the valley floor, or
yeah, because they're a little cooler during what we normally get during the warm afternoons down here in Stag's Leap, where those tannins are ripening and getting polished and getting more sexy. The cooler air up at the afternoon up on Howell Mountain is going to kind of slow that evolution in the grapes. And so Howell Mountain's usually one of the last appellations, one of the last vineyards we pick, just because it takes a little bit longer. They also get it's much colder in the spring as well, so they get a later start. So you kind of like really have to watch the evolution as the season progresses, and it's definitely one of the latest picks for anything that we do.
So what is your outlook on this wine? Because I mean, this is tasting great, but I think this is still, maybe a few years from being, really hitting its stride. I mean, it probably will open up and would be immaculate tomorrow.
I really love this right now, but I mean, there's no signs of any sort of bricking or kind of,
you're absolutely right,
tertiary aromas that you get with kind of wines that are starting to age and become, kind of past their peak or at their peak. I think this is still on its ascension. But gosh, man, this wine with a ribeye would just be heaven to me.
Yeah,
there's something really mushroom in there nice as well. Some chanterelles or
it's starting to get a little bit of that, whether it's not necessarily tertiary, but it's getting a little bit of that earthy quality that's starting to come through. Still a lot of fruit at the forefront though. Just a powerful wine. Yeah. Love it. Well, that will be fun to sip on. Once we're done. Exactly. But hey, the show must go on. So we're going to sort of, I guess we'll wrap it up with the 2019, again, not showing up, but that's what we've got here. 2019 Howell Mountain Cabernet Sauvignon. So effectively the same wine, 5 years younger. Has anything changed for you stylistically in how you make this wine? I mean, I know every vintage you'll have different sort of decisions you have to make, but have you kind of learned anything over the last decade plus that you've been working with these vineyards and making a Howell Mountain wine? Anything kind of?
It's a great question. I think over the years we've gotten better at really focusing in on those tannins and getting them really soft and maybe pulling them off the skins a little bit earlier during élevage, maybe not seeing the 30-35 days in the tank on the skins, and more strategic pump overs a lot more early on, but then tapering off during fermentation. And then our oak selection, I think early on, we found better Coopers and more forests of oak that pair better with the Hell Mountain appellation and those wines that come from there, and really integrate earlier on and contribute to those kind of the silkier textures that we're going for in Hell Mountain. We don't want it to be too brooding or too esoteric. We want it to be accessible and seductive.
I definitely get that in this wine. I can feel the stylistic, just exactly what you described. There's the tannins are a little bit softer. It just seems a little bit more integrated, even being such a young wine. But a lot of that character is still there, that pininess and still that gorgeous core of like dark fruit and a little bit of spice. But yeah, it's a nice youthful Cabernet that still, I think, right now drinks well. And you could have this with, like you say, you could have it with the 2014 and the nice ribeye. You could kind of do a little side by side.
Did you decant this wine at all, or did
no? These were opened. I want to say these were opened at 4 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this hasn't seen a lot of air.
This might need, if you open it at maybe 1 o'clock, that would be we might be a little more happy. But I'm happy now.
I'm happy. I mean, I find most of our, all the Cliff Lady 2019s have such a prettiness to them and a lift and just a vibrancy. And then they kind of, since, the last, I guess, the past year that we've been tasting them, I've seen that. I've recognized that in all those wines. I just kind of think you got 2018, an exceptional vintage, and then you've got a great vintage following it. It's like you got a second crack at just, perfection 2 years in a row. Yeah. Speaking of which, poetry, right? 200-point scores in a row.
Yeah.
But really, there is just a little bit more of a lift to the 2019s. And I certainly find that this wine thoroughly enjoyable now.
I just keep using taste. I keep using the word perfume for the 19s. They just have this perfume that's just so seductive with lots of florals, and along with red fruits and black fruits. There's just, you could sit and contemplate this wine for a long time and pull out lots of different aromas. They're just laden with so much complexity.
I agree. They're always very aromatic. It's like if you could just put me in a little canoe, like right in there, and I could just kind of hang out in the glass and just breathe that in. Like that'd be heaven. What was that movie? Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, where like shrunk down. It would be like that, but Honey, I Shrunk the Adults is what it would be. That's fantastic. Well, that's it for the wines tonight. Unless we have any questions for Chris. Well, we've got him here for another minute. Oh, I do see it. We got a Q&A here. Let me pull that up, make sure that we can cover it. Oh, that was just from Fred. Cheers, Fred. So I guess that pretty much sums it up for the night. Not a lot of wines tonight, but a lot of really great wines. And I hope that you were all excited to receive those and looking forward to enjoying them over the holidays. As I mentioned, if you need anything else for the holidays, let us know. Please give us a call as soon as possible, and we'll do our best to get the wines on their way to you. Look out for that Valentine's dinner invite. It's always a fun night. Chris, I mean, I know we've done that dinner, I don't know how many times. It's your birthday, isn't it? Valentine's Day? Yeah.
Birthday, yeah.
So that's always fun to kind of have multiple things to celebrate. And come and visit us. We'd love to see you. If anyone's thinking about coming to Napa, I love this time of year out here. It's just so fresh and beautiful, and all the hills turn green. And it's just like, I think everybody who's local here, it's like what you talk about. Like, man, isn't winter great here?
It's pretty great.
It's pretty awesome. So with that, Chris, I'll say cheers. Thanks for coming and spending your time with us tonight. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. We appreciate your support. We hope to see you soon. If not, then hopefully in 2023. So happy holidays and all the best. Cheers. Cheers, everyone.